Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was asked about fasting. You already know that the Muslims fast 1 month every year called Ramadan. They're obligated when they are able to fast that 1 month. But there are other days during the year where the Muslims are encouraged to fast out of option, means they volunteer. They're not obligated to do that. So some Muslims were asking the Prophet about fasting certain days of the year. And they came to one question, and pay attention please. They asked the Prophet about fasting Mondays. The Prophet ﷺ gave this answer. ذاك يوم ولدت فيه. ذاك يوم ولدت فيه. They said, what about fasting Monday, O Messenger of Allah? The Prophet ﷺ answered, this is a day on which I was born. This is a day on which I was born. Why would the Prophet ﷺ give this answer? Why wouldn't he just say the fasting of Monday is a good deed, you get reward, and so on? He did with the other questions. He answered, he said what reward a person would take if he fasted the other days. But when it came to Monday, he gave that response. It is a day on which I was born. Do you think the Prophet would give this answer to tell these Muslims, means who asked him, and the Muslims like us who will hear about it later, to just ignore Monday, to ignore the day of his birth? Do you think the Prophet said that just to reduce the value of his birth? Would you tell your child something so that the child will ignore you, or to pay attention to you? Come on, answer. If you tell your child something, do you want the child to just ignore you, or do you want your child to pay attention to what you're telling them? Which way? When the politicians say something, we're gonna reduce tax. I'm sorry, our politicians here? Do they want you to pay attention to that? They want you. When the teachers in a class, they say you cannot talk in class, do they want you to ignore it, or they want you to pay attention to it? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he said that Monday is a day on which he was born, he meant to draw our attention to it. And what is the link? And not the weakest link here, the strongest link. Is that fasting is an act of worship. And Prophet Muhammad said, okay, I was born on that day. So if you're trying to fast Monday, and you're trying to be obedient to Allah, I'm telling you, this is the day I was born on. So there is a connection between the two. It means if you observe your fasting on Mondays, and you observe my birth, then you are obeying God. You will get reward. And this is something that few people on earth do not agree with. They say if you celebrate the birth of the Prophet, then you are doing something against the teaching of the Prophet. This hadith that I just told you is narrated by Imam Muslim. It's a sahih, a strong hadith. It is a tradition of the Prophet that can be used as a proof for rulings. Hence, we should follow the teachings of the Prophet by observing this day of his birth. The companions of the Prophet, those men and women who witnessed the message of the Prophet being spread, they realized that. They realized the importance of the presence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And how did his presence started? How did it start? By his birth. How did he come into this world? By his birth. So they realized that this is important. That's why they were following the life of the Prophet in every detail. People who are not Muslim, who studied the life of the Prophet, they said they never saw a person in history who was followed so in detail than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Why do you think those Sahaba, those companions, did that? Because they saw the connection between his birth and the message that he brought. So let's revive this occasion. Let's celebrate our love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our attachment to him, our loyalty to him alayhi salatu wasalam. Now really, some people may say, I love you, I love the Prophet, I love and I love. Some people may say it with their tongue, but they don't mean it. If you really mean it, it means you need to follow the teachings of this great Prophet, Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. You need to order the good, al-amru bil-ma'ruf. You need to forbid the evil. You need to prohibit people in one way or another with the good words, with the good advice, to avoid committing the evil in its various forms. You need to learn this religion from the trustworthy people, not from the charlatans, not from the swindlers, not from the fake people. You need to learn this religion from the people who learned it from other trustworthy people, from other trustworthy people, in a connected chain of trustworthy teachers back to the Prophet himself, alayhi salatu wassalam. My wife, may Allah give her health, she was approached by her father, and she started talking about who was not a Muslim. And he started talking about Islam. She told him, why don't you ask Ali, he's there, that's your son-in-law, he's a Muslim, he's learned about Islam, then ask him about Islam. Don't just make your own image or idea about Islam by reading books, by listening to the media, which is mostly biased against Muslims for one reason or another. Why don't you go to the source? You want to drink pure water? Don't go down to the river that is already polluted. Go back to the stream, which is pure and healthy. So we need to apply this religion in a correct way, the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered. Allah loves Prophet Muhammad, and we must love Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we say God, Allah loves, we don't mean that God has emotions. Ladies, please. We don't mean that God has emotions, because the one who has emotions, you know, emotions start at one time and they end. You're happy for an hour, 2, 3, maybe 1 minute, and then your happiness ends and something else comes in. Whoever is attributed with created attributes is a creation. The Creator does not resemble His creation. Hence the attributes of the Creator are different from the attributes of the creation. What would mean that Allah loves Muhammad and loves the obedient Muslims? We mean that Allah accepts and rewards those obedient people.